If you walked past my house on Trad Street last April, you would have stopped to stare. Everyone did. It's one of those big, white, historic homes here in Charleston that looks like it was cut right out of a magazine. We had the piazza blue ceiling on the porch to ward off spirits, the oversized ferns hanging perfectly still in the humidity, and the smell of jasmine thick in the air. It was the kind of house where bad things just didn't happen. Or, at least, that's what I told myself. My name is Christina. I'm 65 years old, and I've spent my entire life building a reputation as a good mother, a faithful churchgoer, and a decent woman. I thought I had earned my peace. I thought I knew exactly who my family was. But I was looking at my life through a stained glass window. Everything looked pretty and colorful, but I couldn't see the reality on the other side. It started on a Sunday. Sunday afternoons in the South are sacred. It's a time for pot roast, sweet tea, and family. My son, Kelly, and his wife, Joyce, were coming over for dinner just like they did every week. I need you to understand something about my son, Kelly. He wasn't just my son. He was my golden boy. He was the child who never gave me a day of trouble in high school. He was the quarterback who actually did his homework. He opened doors for strangers. He said, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, sir." When he walked into a room, he had this smile that could charm the paint right off the walls. He was a successful accountant, respected in town, and I was so proud of him that my chest would physically ache with it. And then there was Joyce. Oh, how I love that girl. When Kelly first brought her home, I was worried. You know how mothers are. We think no one is good enough for our boys. But Joyce was different. She was soft-spoken, kind, and she looked at my son like he hung the moon and stars. And the best part, she was 6 months pregnant with my very first grandchild, a little girl. That Sunday, the heat was already rising, sticking my blouse to my back as I set the table on the screened-in porch. I wanted everything to be perfect. I polished the silver forks until I could see my own face in them. I wanted Joyce to feel special. I wanted Kelly to relax after his long work week. When their car pulled into the driveway, I watched them through the kitchen window. This is the memory that haunts me the most now. I saw Kelly get out of the driver's seat and actually jog, around to the passenger side to open the door for Joyce. He offered her his hand to help her out, treating her like she was made of glass. He placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her up the walkway. I remember sighing happily. I thought, I raised him right. They came inside, and the house instantly felt fuller. Joyce was glowing. Pregnancy suited her. Her cheeks were flushed, and she had one hand constantly resting on her baby bump, rubbing it in slow circles. "Hi, Mom," Kelly said, kissing my cheek. He smelled like expensive cologne and peppermint. "Something smells amazing. Just a pot roast." "Honey," I said, ushering them to the porch. "Joyce, sit down. Don't you dare lift a finger. You're carrying precious cargo." Joyce smiled, but she looked a little tired. "Thanks, Christina. It's been a long week. My back is killing me." "Here," Kelly said immediately. He grabbed a throw pillow from the wicker sofa and placed it behind Joyce's back. "Is that better, babe? Do you need water?" "Ice. I can run to the store and get that sparkling juice you like." He was hovering over her, attentive and doting. I watched them and felt a warm swell of gratitude. You hear so many horror stories these days. You hear about husbands who cheat or men who won't lift a finger to help with the baby. But not my Kelly. He was completely obsessed with her. We sat down to eat, and the conversation was easy. We talked about the nursery colors, soft yellow and gray. We talked about the church bake sale coming up. Kelly cut Joyce's meat for her, joking that he didn't want her to exert herself. We all laughed. It was charming. It was excessive, sure, but I took it as love. I didn't know yet that control can look a lot like care if you don't know what you're watching. After dinner, Kelly insisted on doing the dishes. "You two ladies relax," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "I've got this." Joyce and I sat on the porch swing, the chains creaking rhythmically as we pushed back and forth. The sun was starting to dip low, casting that golden, hazy light over the garden. "He's a good man, Joyce," I said quietly. I felt the need to say it. Joyce looked down at her hands. She twisted her wedding ring. "He is," she said. "He really wants everything to be perfect for the baby. He gets that from me." I laughed. "We just want the best." My neighbor, Martha, was out in her yard pruning her azaleas. Martha is the kind of woman who has eyes in the back of her head and knows everyone's business before they do. She waved her shears at us. "Christina," she called out, "is that Kelly's car I see?" I walked over to the railing, bursting with pride. "Yes, Martha. He's inside doing the dishes so Joyce can rest. Can you believe it?" Martha shook her head, smiling. "You hit the jackpot with that one, Joyce," she shouted up to the porch. "A handsome husband who cleans? You better hold on to him tight. Honey, men like that don't exist anymore." I looked back at Joyce. She offered a weak smile to Martha and nodded. "I know," Joyce said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I know." I turned back to Martha, beaming. "I raised him to treat a woman like a queen," I declared loud enough for half the street to hear. "He would never disrespect his wife. Not my son." I actually said those words. I stood there in the safety of my beautiful porch, surrounded by my manicured garden, and I announced to the world that my son was perfect. I felt so secure in that moment. I felt like my life was a steady, unbreakable thing. Inside the kitchen, I could hear the clinking of plates and the water running. It sounded domestic and safe. I didn't see Kelly's face as he scrubbed those plates. I didn't see the way his jaw was clenched or the way his eyes were fixed on the window, watching Joyce and me talking. I only saw the facade, the sweet tea, the southern manners, the dutiful son. I didn't know that the perfect Sunday dinner was a performance. I didn't know that my golden boy was already keeping score of every smile Joyce gave to someone else. As the sun finally set and the cicadas started to sing, I hugged them both goodbye. "See you next week, Mom," Kelly said. He had his arm around Joyce's shoulders, tight. A little too tight, maybe, but I didn't think that then. I just thought he was holding her close. "Drive safe," I called out as they backed down the driveway. I went back inside, locked the door, and turned off the porch light. I went to bed that night, thanking God for my blessings. I slept soundly, completely unaware that the nightmare had already started right under my nose. I didn't know that was the last peaceful Sunday we would ever have. The storm wasn't coming. It was already in the car with her. The thing about a house built on secrets is that it doesn't collapse all at once. It settles. You hear a creak in the floorboards here, see a hairline crack in the plaster there, but you tell yourself it's just the house settling. You tell yourself it's normal. That's exactly what I did for the next few weeks. I convinced myself that the heaviness in the air was just the Charleston humidity. But looking back, I know it was the silence of a woman slowly disappearing. I started dropping by their house in the middle of the week. I told myself I was just being a helpful grandmother-to-be, bringing over casseroles or fresh linens. But deep down, there was an itch in my spirit I couldn't scratch. Something felt off, but I couldn't put a name to it. One Tuesday, I let myself in with the spare key Kelly had given me. The house was immaculate, too immaculate. You know how a home feels when people are actually living in it. There are shoes by the door, a magazine on the table. But their living room looked like a museum exhibit. I found Joyce in the kitchen. She was standing over the sink, gripping the edge of the counter, so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't crying, not exactly. She was just staring out into the backyard, taking shallow, shaky breaths. Joyce. I called out softly. She jumped nearly a foot in the air. She spun around, her hand flying to her chest. When she saw it was me, her shoulders dropped, but her eyes were wide, like a deer caught in headlights. Christina, she breathed out. I'm sorry. I didn't hear you come in. I was just thinking. I brought over some chicken bog, I said, setting the dish on the island. I thought you might be too tired to cook. Joyce looked at the casserole dish, and her face crumbled. A single tear leaked out, followed by another. I was supposed to make dinner, she whispered. Kelly wanted pot roast again. I forgot to take the meat out of the freezer. He's going to be disappointed. I remember feeling a flash of irritation. Not at Kelly, but at Joyce. I thought, it's just a pot roast. Honey, why are you making a Greek tragedy out of frozen beef? Oh, stop it, I said, moving to hug her. She felt frail in my arms, despite the baby bump. He's not going to starve. He can eat leftovers. You're pregnant, Joyce. You have pregnancy brain. It happens to the best of us. She pulled back and looked at me with this desperate, searching expression. That's what he says, she said softly. He says I'm not myself lately. He says I'm losing my grip on things. Do you think I'm losing it, Christina? I laughed. I actually laughed. Of course not. You're just hormonal. Your body is doing the hard work of making a miracle. Kelly understands that. The front door opened then. We both froze. Kelly walked into the kitchen a moment later. He was wearing his suit, looking every bit the successful professional. He smiled when he saw me, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. It was a mask. Mom, he said, kissing my cheek. Then he turned to Joyce. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hey, babe, I see dinner isn't started. He didn't yell. He didn't raise a hand. His voice was level, calm, almost gentle. That was the trick. If he had screamed, I might have stepped in. But he sounded like a patient father dealing with an unruly child. I forgot to defrost the roast, Joyce stammered, her eyes fixed on the floor. I'm so sorry, Kelly. I got distracted organizing the nursery. Kelly sighed. It was a long, heavy sigh that sucked all the air out of the room. He looked at me and shook his head, offering a tight, sympathetic smile. See what I mean, Mom, he said, gesturing to Joyce. She's been like this for weeks. Forgetful. Emotional. I come home after working 12 hours to pay for this house, and she can't remember to take a piece of meat out of the freezer. He walked over to Joyce and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Joyce flinched just a tiny bit, but I missed it. Or maybe I chose not to see it. It's okay, sweetie, he cooed. I know you're overwhelmed. You're clearly not capable of handling the household stress right now. Maybe Mom should keep the spare key, and you should just focus on resting. I'll handle the thinking from now on. I'm sorry, Joyce whispered again. I watched this scene, and I felt a surge of protectiveness. For my son, I looked at him and saw a man who was tired, stressed, and carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was up for a big promotion at the firm. He was renovating the nursery. He was doing everything right. And here was his wife, falling apart over dinner. Kelly, don't be hard on her, I said, but my tone was light. But Joyce, honey, you really should write things down if you're forgetting them. You want to make a nice home for him, don't you? Joyce looked at me. For a second, I saw a flash of betrayal in her eyes. She was looking for an ally, and instead, I handed her a to-do list. I try, she said, her voice hollow. I try so hard. I know you do, Kelly said. He turned to the fridge. Mom brought chicken bog. We'll eat that. Again. The way he said again was a slap in the face, but he delivered it with a smile. We ate dinner together, but the silence was thick enough to choke on. Every time Joyce reached for the salt, she looked at Kelly first. Every time she spoke, she trailed off, looking to him for approval. Kelly spent the whole meal talking about his work, about how incompetent his assistant was, about how he was the only one holding the firm together. He was rewriting reality, painting himself as the martyr and everyone else as the burden. When I left that evening, Kelly walked me to my car. The cicadas were screaming in the trees. "Mom," he said, leaning on my driver's side door, "I'm worried about her." "The hormones are rough," I agreed, fishing for my keys. "It's more than that," he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "She's paranoid. She thinks I'm watching her. She thinks I'm judging her. I found her crying in the closet yesterday because she couldn't find her favorite shoes. I think she might be mentally unstable, Mom. I'm worried about the baby." My heart stopped. "Unstable? Kelly, she's just emotional." "I hope you're right," he said, looking at the ground. "But you didn't see her last night. She was screaming at me because I moved a vase. Screaming, 'I'm scared, Mom. I don't want to leave her alone with the baby when it comes.'" I looked at my son's handsome, worried face, and I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my Kelly. He wouldn't lie about something like that. I reached out and patted his hand. "You just be patient," I told him. "She'll snap out of it once the baby is here. You're a good husband, Kelly. You're doing a great job." He smiled, and that charm was back. "Thanks, Mom. I'm trying. I just need you to be on my side. She listens to you. If she starts acting crazy around you, don't indulge her, okay? Tell her to calm down." "I will. I promised." I drove home that night feeling a heavy knot of anxiety in my stomach. But the anxiety wasn't for Joyce. It was for Kelly. I spent the drive home thinking about how hard it must be for him to live with a wife who was losing her mind. I became his accomplice that night, and I didn't even know it. I validated his narrative. I gave him permission to treat her like a child. I didn't know that the forgotten roast was in the fridge the whole time, pushed to the back, where she couldn't see it. I didn't know he had moved the vase on purpose just to upset her. I didn't know that he was systematically breaking her down, piece by piece, so that by the time the first bruise appeared, no one would believe her. I thought I was being a supportive mother. In reality, I was helping him build the cage. You know that feeling before a summer thunderstorm hits Charleston? The air gets so thick and heavy you have to fight just to draw a breath. That is exactly what my son's house started to feel like. I stopped seeing Joyce outside. You have to understand, in our neighborhood, women are always outside. We garden, we walk, we sit on porches. But Joyce just vanished. The blinds on their beautiful double porch home were always drawn tight, even in the middle of the day. I went over there on a Wednesday morning, unannounced. I told myself I was just dropping off some hydrangeas from my garden, but really, I was checking in. I walked up the driveway and saw Joyce sitting on the bottom step of the porch. She was dressed in her pajamas, which wasn't like her at all. She was staring at her car, her little blue sedan that she loved. "Joyce," I called out, unlatching the gate. She looked up, and for a second, she looked relieved. But then her eyes darted to the front door. "Christina, you shouldn't be here. Kelly is working from home today. He doesn't like noise." "I'm not noise, I'm his mother," I said, trying to keep it light. "Why are you sitting out here in the heat? Honey." "I wanted to go to the grocery store," she said, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to buy peaches. I have a craving, but I can't find my keys." "Well, check the hook by the door," I said. "They aren't there," she whispered. "Kelly has them. He says I'm a danger on the road now. He says because of the pregnancy, my reaction times are too slow. He says I almost hit a mailbox last week." She looked at me, tears pooling in her eyes. Christina, I don't remember almost hitting a mailbox. But he swore I did. My stomach turned over. I looked at the car. There wasn't a scratch on it. The front door opened. Kelly stepped out. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket, just a crisp white shirt. He didn't smile this time. Mom, he said, it wasn't a greeting, it was a warning. What are you doing here? I brought flowers, I said, holding up the hydrangeas. And Joyce says she wants peaches. Why do you have her car keys, Kelly? He walked down the steps and put a hand on Joyce's shoulder. She went rigid. Mom, we talked about this, he said, his voice smooth but cold. Joyce is high risk right now. She gets dizzy. I can't have her driving around town and fainting behind the wheel with my daughter in her belly. I'm doing this for her own good. I'm protecting my family. I just wanted peaches. Joyce whispered, looking at the ground. And I told you I would get them later, Kelly said, tightening his grip. You need to be inside, resting. The heat is bad for the baby. Go inside, Joyce. It wasn't a request. Joyce stood up slowly, looked at me one last time with eyes that begged me to do something, and went back into the dark house. I stood there in the driveway, clutching those hydrangeas until the stems snapped. Kelly, I said, don't you think you're being a little extreme? Taking her keys. He looked at me, and his face was blank. I'm handling it, Mom. You raised me to be a protector, right? That's what I'm doing. Don't undermine me. He turned and walked back inside, locking the deadbolt behind him. The sound of that lock clicking into place echoed in my head all the way home. It didn't stop with the car. A few days later, I called Joyce to ask about the baby shower guest list. The phone rang and rang. Finally, someone picked up. Hello. It was Kelly. Oh, Kelly, I said, surprised. I was calling for Joyce. She's unavailable, he said. Is she napping? No, he said flatly. I've taken her phone for a few days. She was reading too many negative stories on the internet. It was stressing her out. Stress produces cortisol, Mom. Cortisol is bad for the baby's brain development. So no phone. I'm filtering her calls. Kelly, you can't just cut her off from the world, I said, my voice rising. Her sister has been trying to reach her. Her sister is toxic, Kelly snapped. She asks too many questions. I'm cleaning up Joyce's life. I'm making it peaceful. You should be thanking me. He hung up on me. I stared at the receiver, my hand shaking. My son, the polite, charming boy who opened doors, had just hung up on his mother. The final straw, the moment I knew we were in dangerous territory, was Sunday morning. In Charleston, you do not miss church. It just isn't done. We have attended the same service at St. Michael's for 30 years. We sit in the same pew. People notice if you aren't there. The bells were ringing, signaling the start of the service, and Kelly and Joyce weren't in their spots. I felt the whispers of the other ladies in the congregation. Where's the young couple? Is the baby okay? I couldn't focus on the sermon. As soon as the final hymn ended, I drove straight to their house. I didn't call first. I banged on the front door. Kelly, Joyce. It took a long time for the door to open. When it did, Kelly blocked the doorway. He was wearing sweatpants. He hadn't shaved. The house behind him was dark. Where were you? I demanded. Everyone was asking, is Joyce okay? She's fine, he said, leaning against the doorframe. We aren't going to church anymore. Excuse me? I gasped. Since when? Since I decided it's too much pressure on her, he said. People staring. People touching her belly. It's invasive. We're going to do our own worship here, at home. Privately. Kelly, that is ridiculous, I said, trying to push past him to see Joyce. Let me see her. I want to hear this from her. He didn't budge. He was a wall of muscle. He looked down at me, and for the first time in his life, I saw genuine disdain in his eyes. You don't need to see her, he snarled. You need to back off. This is my house. This is my wife. This is my child. You are a guest here, Mom. And right now, you are an unwelcome one. I froze. My golden boy had just bared his teeth at me. You're speaking to your mother, I whispered, shocked. Then act like a mother and trust me, he spat. Go home, Christina, before you make me angry. He slammed the door in my face. I stood on the porch, trembling. I could hear the faint sound of the television inside, but nothing else. No laughter, no conversation, just the hum of the air conditioner and the terrifying realization that my son had built a fortress, and I was on the outside. He had cut the phone lines. He had taken the car. He had cut off God and the church. He had removed every single person who could possibly help her. I walked back to my car, my legs feeling like lead. I sat in the driver's seat and just gripped the steering wheel. I realized then that I wasn't just walking on eggshells anymore. I was walking through a minefield, and I had no idea how to get Joyce out without blowing everything up. The heat in Charleston that June was suffocating. It was the kind of wet, heavy heat that sticks your clothes to your skin the second you step outside. But looking back, I don't think the heaviness in my chest that afternoon was just the humidity. It was the feeling of a dam about to break. It was a Tuesday. I remember that clearly because Kelly was supposed to be at an overnight conference in Atlanta. It was the first time in weeks that Joyce was going to be alone in that house. As soon as I saw his car pull out of the driveway that morning, I waited 10 minutes just to be safe. And then I drove over. I didn't knock. I used the spare key, the one Kelly had tried to take back, but I had lied and said I lost. I let myself into the kitchen. The house was silent, but not peaceful. It felt like a held breath. Joyce. I called out. She was in the sunroom, sitting in the wicker chair. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She just let out a long, shaky exhale, like she had been holding it for hours. He's gone, she whispered. I know, honey. I watched him leave. I said. I set down a pitcher of sweet tea I'd brought from home. I thought we could have a glass. Just us girls. Like we used to. Joyce nodded, but she didn't move to get up. That's when I noticed what she was wearing. It was 90 degrees outside, humid enough to drown in, and Joyce was wearing a thick, long-sleeved cardigan buttoned all the way to her chin. She looked pale, sweating along her hairline, but she had that sweater pulled tight around her. Honey, aren't you burning up? I asked, pouring 2 glasses of tea. The ice clinked against the glass, the only sound in the room. Take that sweater off. The AC isn't even on. I'm fine, she said quickly, too quickly. I've been getting chills. It's the pregnancy. I walked over to hand her the glass. Her hands were shaking so bad that when she reached for it, the condensation made her grip slip. The glass wobbled, and cold tea splashed over the rim, landing on her wrist. Oh, she gasped, jerking her arm back. In that split second, the sleeve of her cardigan slid up. Time didn't just stop, it shattered. I saw it. It wasn't just a little bump or a scrape. On her forearm, just above the wrist, were 4 distinct dark purple marks. They were oval-shaped. They were fingerprints. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to crush the blood vessels beneath the skin. And judging by the color, deep violet turning to green at the edges, it had happened days ago. Joyce saw me looking. She scrambled to pull the sleeve back down, her eyes wide with panic. I fell, she blurted out. Her voice was high and thin. I tripped on the rug. I caught myself on the doorframe. I set my glass down on the table. I didn't feel like a polite Southern lady anymore. I felt a cold, hard rage settling in my stomach. Joyce, I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears, low and dangerous. Pull up your sleeve. No, Christina, really, Pull up the sleeve, Joyce. I shouted. She flinched like I had hit her. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she unbuttoned the cuff and rolled the fabric up to her elbow. I had to cover my mouth to keep from screaming. The bruises didn't stop at her wrist. Her entire upper arm was a map of violence. There were yellowing splotches near her elbow, fresh red marks near her shoulder, and those terrifying finger marks on her bicep. It looked like someone had grabbed her and shaken her like a rag doll. I stared at the purple marks against her pale skin. This wasn't hormones. This wasn't clumsiness. This was my son, my golden boy. The boy who opened doors for strangers had done this to his pregnant wife. He didn't mean to. Joyce was crying now, wrapping her arms around her belly. He was just stressed. I didn't have the laundry folded right. And he got frustrated. He was trying to move me out of the way. He grabbed you. I stated. He apologized after, she sobbed. He cried, Christina. He cried for an hour. He brought me ice. He swore on the baby's life he would never touch me again. And when was that? I pointed to the fresh red mark near her shoulder. When did that one happen? Joyce looked down. This morning, before he left. That was it. The denial finally broke. The excuses I had been making for weeks, the stress, the job, the new house, they all evaporated. I wasn't looking at a troubled marriage. I was looking at a crime scene. I turned on my heel and marched into the kitchen. I went straight for the wall phone. I didn't even think. My hands were shaking, but I knew the number. 911. I had to get the police here. I had to get a report. I had to get him locked up before he came back from Atlanta. I lifted the receiver. I heard the dial tone. I pressed the 9. Suddenly, there was a hand on my arm. Joyce had run into the kitchen, stumbling, breathless. She slammed her hand down on the receiver hook, cutting off the line. No, she screamed. Christina, stop. You can't. Are you crazy? I yelled back, trying to push her hand away. Look at your arm, Joyce. He is hurting you. He is hurting my granddaughter. I am calling the police, and I am having him arrested. He won't be arrested. Joyce shrieked. Her face was inches from mine, wet with tears and terror. You know he won't. He's Kelly. He knows everyone in town. He'll tell them I'm crazy. He's been telling everyone I'm unstable for months. Who are they going to believe? The hysterical pregnant woman or the respected businessman? I paused. Her words hit me like a bucket of ice water. I remembered my conversation with Kelly in the driveway, how easily I had believed him when he said she was unstable. They will see the bruises, I argued, but my voice was wavering. He'll say I did it to myself. Joyce cried. He told me that if I ever called the cops, he would show them my medical records. He's been documenting my mood swings. He has a file, Christina. He's been planning this. She grabbed my shoulders, her grip desperate. And if the police come and they don't arrest him, he will move us. He can't. He will, she sobbed. He's already talked about jobs in Texas or Ohio. If you call the police, he will pack us up tonight. He will take me away. And you will never see this baby. You will never know her name. You will never hold her. She will grow up in a house with him, all alone, and you won't be there to protect her. I froze. The receiver was still in my hand. The dial tone had started its angry beeping sound. I looked at Joyce's terrified face. Then I looked down at her swollen belly. You will never see this baby. The threat hung in the humid air between us. I knew my son. I knew his pride. If I humiliated him by calling the police, he would scorch the earth. He would cut me out just like he cut out the church. He would take that baby and vanish. And I would be left here in Charleston with nothing but my righteousness and an empty nursery. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Every instinct in my body screamed to call for help, to scream for the neighbors, to end this right now. But the fear of losing that baby paralyzed me. If I don't call, I whispered, my throat tight. Then what? We just let him hit you. No, Joyce wiped her face. She took a deep breath. I have a plan, but I need time. I need to get my birth certificate. I need to get cash. He tracks the credit cards. I need 1 week to get a go bag ready. Next Tuesday, he has late meetings. I can leave then, but I need you to help me. I need you to be calm. I need you to pretend everything is fine. 1 week. I asked, looking at her bruises. Joyce, that's 7 days. I can do it, she said, her eyes hardening. I can survive 7 days, but not if he thinks we're conspiring against him. You have to promise me, Christina. Put the phone down. For the baby. I looked at the phone. I looked at the bruises. I looked at the unborn life between us. I made a choice. I slowly lowered the receiver back onto the cradle. The click sound was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Okay, I whispered. 1 week. We pack a bag. We get cash. And then I take you away. Joyce collapsed against me, sobbing in relief. But as I held her there in that silent kitchen, a cold dread washed over me. I had just made a deal with the devil. I had chosen strategy over safety. I had gambled my daughter-in-law's life on the hope that we could outsmart a monster. I hung up that phone because I was a grandmother terrified of losing my blood. But looking back, I don't know if it was bravery or cowardice. I left Joyce in that house that day. I drove away, leaving her alone to wait for him to come home. I have lost sleep every single night since then, wondering if I made the fatal mistake right there in that kitchen. I need to ask you, mother to mother, grandmother to grandmother, if you were standing in that kitchen, seeing those bruises, and you knew calling 911 might mean never seeing your grandchild again, what would you have done? Would you have made the call? Or would you have hung up the phone? We were so close. That is what keeps me up at night. We were on day 5 of the 7-day plan. We had made it through the week by walking on eggshells, smiling until our faces hurt, and saying, yes, Kelly, and you're right, Kelly. It was Sunday afternoon. Kelly was supposed to be at the country club for a 4-hour golf game with his partners. He had left at noon in his polo shirt and khakis, kissing Joyce on the forehead like the perfect husband. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, we moved into high gear. We were in the master bedroom. I was helping Joyce pack the go bag. We couldn't take suitcases. That would be too obvious if he came home and saw them missing from the closet. We had to be smart. We were stuffing cash, travel-sized toiletries, and baby clothes into a battered old gym bag that Kelly never used. I got the birth certificates. Joyce whispered, her hands shaking as she tucked the papers inside a pair of rolled-up socks. And the cash is in the tampon box. He never looks there. Good, I said. My heart was racing, but I felt focused. Now, grab your prenatal vitamins and your comfortable shoes. We leave Tuesday, morning the 2nd. He heads to work. We were frantic but hopeful. For the first time in months, I saw a spark of life in Joyce's eyes. We felt like we were taking control back. We were 2 women outsmarting the monster. And then we heard it. The sound of gravel crunching in the driveway. It wasn't the slow, heavy roll of the garbage truck. It was the sharp, aggressive skid of a luxury sedan braking too hard. Joyce froze. Her face went completely gray. He's back, she whispered. He's not supposed to be back for 3 hours. Hide the bag, I hissed, but it was too late. The gym bag was sitting wide open on the bed, spilling over with baby onesies and stacks of $20 bills. We heard the front door slam downstairs. The sound shook the whole house. It wasn't a normal close. It was a declaration of war. Joyce, he roared from the foyer. It wasn't the charming voice. It wasn't the manipulative voice. It was the voice of a stranger. It was a guttural, animal sound. Joyce started to shake so hard her teeth chattered. He knows, she whimpered. Christina, he knows. I tried to shove the bag under the bed, but my arthritic fingers fumbled with the zipper. Before I could hide it, heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Kelly appeared in the doorway. He was still wearing his golf clothes, but his face was unrecognizable. His eyes were bloodshot, bulging out of his head. He looked from me to Joyce to the bag on the bed. The silence that followed was louder than a gunshot. He walked into the room, calm and terrifyingly slow. He picked up the gym bag. He looked inside. He saw the cash. He saw the baby clothes. He looked up at Joyce. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked. His voice was whisper quiet. I was just organizing," Joyce stammered, stepping back until she hit the dresser. "For the hospital. For the baby. With $3,000 in cash." Kelly asked. He turned the bag upside down and shook it. The money fluttered to the floor. The socks with the birth certificates thudded onto the hardwood. "You were leaving me?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Kelly, please," I started, stepping forward. "We were just—" "Shut up," he screamed at me. He spun around and threw the empty gym bag at my head. I ducked, and it hit the lamp, sending it crashing to the floor. Then he turned his focus back to Joyce. "I give you everything," he spat, walking toward her. "I give you a house. I give you a life. And you try to steal my daughter." "I wasn't stealing her," Joyce cried. "I just want to be safe." "Safe?" Kelly laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "You think you're unsafe here? I'll show you unsafe." He lunged. It happened so fast. He didn't slap her. He grabbed her by the shoulders, right over those fresh bruises, and he shoved her. Hard. Joyce flew backward. She wasn't steady on her feet because of the pregnancy. She stumbled, her arms flailing, and she crashed hard into the hallway console table. Crack! Her lower back hit the edge of the wood with a sickening sound. A porcelain vase on the table shattered, sending shards flying across the floor. Joyce crumbled to the ground, landing on her side, screaming in pain. She curled into a ball, clutching her stomach. "My baby!" she shrieked. "My baby!" Something inside me snapped. I wasn't Christina, the church lady, anymore. I wasn't a polite Southern mother. I was an animal protecting its young. I didn't think. I threw myself between Kelly and Joyce. Kelly was 6'2". He was in his prime. I am a 65-year-old woman with bad knees. But I planted my feet on that floor, spread my arms wide, and screamed. "Get back!" I yelled. "Don't you touch her! Don't you dare touch her again!" Kelly looked at me. He was breathing heavy, his chest heaving. He looked down at his wife, crying on the floor amidst the broken porcelain. And then he looked at me. You would think seeing his mother would stop him. You would think the woman who changed his diapers, who nursed him through fevers, who paid for his college. You would think I would be the line he wouldn't cross. But the evil had taken over completely. He stepped forward, towering over me. His face was twisted in a sneer. "Move, Mom," he said. "No," I said, staring him right in the eye. "You will have to go through me." Kelly raised his hand. He made a fist. He pulled his arm back. I flinched. I couldn't help it. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the impact. I waited for my own son to strike me down in the hallway of the home I helped him buy. "Do it," I whispered, trembling. "Hit your mother. Show God exactly who you are." The air crackled with tension. I could hear Joyce sobbing behind me, a low, wounded sound. I could feel the heat coming off Kelly's body. He held that fist in the air for what felt like a lifetime. Then he let out a roar of frustration and punched the wall right next to my head. His fist went through the drywall. Dust exploded into the air. "Get out," he seethed, pulling his bleeding hand from the wall. "Both of you, get out of my sight before I kill you." I opened my eyes. I didn't waste a second. I didn't lecture him. I turned around and knelt beside Joyce. "Can you stand?" I asked her, urgent. "My back," she gasped. "Christina, something is wrong." "My stomach, it hurts." I looked down. Joyce's pants were dark. She was bleeding. Panic, cold and sharp, washed over me. The violence hadn't just bruised her this time. The shove into the table had done something internal. "We are going to the hospital," I announced, my voice shaking but loud. I helped Joyce stand. She leaned her entire weight on me. We hobbled toward the stairs, stepping over the money scattered on the floor, money that was useless to us now. Kelly stood there in the hallway, nursing his bleeding hand, watching us go. He didn't try to stop us. But as we reached the top of the stairs, he spoke. "If you tell them anything," he called out, his voice eerily calm again, "I will tell them you pushed her. I will tell them you have dementia. No one will believe you." I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just held on to Joyce tighter, praying that the warm, sticky blood I felt on her clothes wasn't the end of my granddaughter's life. The facade wasn't just cracked anymore. It was shattered into a million sharp pieces, and we were walking barefoot right through them. You would think the drive to the hospital would be loud. You would expect screaming, crying, or maybe the sound of tires screeching against the pavement. But it wasn't. It was the quietest 20 minutes of my entire life. And that silence was far more terrifying than the shouting. We got to the bottom of the stairs, Joyce leaning heavily on me, clutching her stomach. I reached into my purse for my keys. I was shaking, but I had a plan. I was going to drive her to Roper Hospital, drop her at the door, and then park the car right in front of a police cruiser. But before I could even lift the keys, Kelly was there. He had wrapped his bleeding hand in a kitchen towel. He looked calm, eerily calm. The monster who had just punched a hole in the wall was gone. In his place was the head of the household. "Give me the keys, Mom," he said. He didn't shout. He held out his good hand, palm up. "I am driving her," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You are not getting in a car with us." I said, "Give me the keys," Kelly repeated. He took a step closer. "Look at you. You're shaking. You're hysterical. Do you really think you can drive safely right now? What if you crash? Do you want to kill Joyce and the baby after everything that's happened?" He twisted the knife perfectly. He used my own fear against me. He made me the danger. "I'm driving," he stated, snatching the keys from my frozen fingers. "Get her in the car. Now." He marched out the front door. I looked at Joyce. Her face was pale, beads of sweat gathering on her upper lip. She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, but she nodded. We had no choice. We were hostages in our own driveway. I helped Joyce into the passenger seat of his pristine luxury sedan. I climbed into the back. Kelly slid into the driver's seat, adjusted the rearview mirror so he could see my face, and started the engine. The air conditioning blasted on, freezing cold. It smelled like leather and that peppermint cologne he always wore. It smelled like success. It made me want to vomit. As we pulled out of the neighborhood, passing the perfectly manicured lawns and the neighbors walking their dogs, Kelly started to speak. "Here is what happened," he said. His voice was conversational, like he was discussing the weather. Joyce was walking down the front porch steps. Her sandal caught on that loose board we've been meaning to fix. She fell forward. She hit her stomach on the railing. Joyce was curled into a ball, holding her belly. She didn't answer. "Joyce," Kelly said, his voice sharpening just a fraction. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you," she whispered. "Say it back to me," he commanded. "I fell on the steps," Joyce recited, her voice breaking. "I tripped." "Good," Kelly said. He turned onto the highway. And Mom, you were inside the kitchen. You didn't see the fall, but you heard her scream. You came running out. That's it. That is the whole story. I stared at the back of his head. I'm not going to lie for you, Kelly. I said, not this time. She is bleeding. Kelly met my eyes in the rearview mirror. His eyes were flat, like a shark's. You are going to lie, Mom, he said softly. Because if you don't, here is what happens next. I tell the doctors that Joyce has been having episodes. I show them the journal I've been keeping of her mood swings. I tell them you've been confused lately, forgetting things, getting aggressive. My blood ran cold. And then, he continued, CPS gets involved. They take the baby until they can determine a stable environment. And since I'm the one with the steady job and the clean record, who do you think gets custody? Me. And I will take that little girl, and we will move to Seattle. You will never see her. You will never see me. He paused to let that sink in. But, he added, his voice softening back to that sickening fake sweetness, if we just stick to the story, we get Joyce patched up, we go home, and we forget this ever happened. We can be a family again. It's your choice, Mom. Do you want to be a grandmother, or do you want to be a stranger? I slumped back against the leather seat. He knew exactly where to hit me. He knew my greatest fear wasn't death. It was being erased from my grandchild's life. I hate you, I whispered. That's fine, Kelly said, turning on the blinker. Just smile when we walk in. When we pulled up to the emergency room overhang, the performance began. Kelly threw the car into park and leaped out. He ran to the other side, flinging the door open. Help, he shouted to the orderly standing by the automatic doors. My wife. She fell. Please, someone help her. He was frantic. He was terrified. He was the picture of a loving, panicked husband. I watched him scoop Joyce up into his arms, carrying her gently to the wheelchair the orderly brought over. He was stroking her hair, whispering, It's okay, baby, I've got you. If I hadn't been there, I would have believed him. That's how good he was. I followed them inside, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. The hospital smell hit me, antiseptic and floor wax. It's a smell that usually means help is coming, but today it just felt like another trap. They wheeled Joyce to the triage desk. The nurse, a young woman with tired eyes, looked up. Name and date of birth, she asked, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Joyce opened her mouth to speak, but Kelly was faster. Joyce Ortiz, he said. He was standing right next to the wheelchair, his hand resting on her shoulder. To the nurse, it looked like comfort. To me, I saw his thumb digging into the soft hollow of her collarbone. A warning. She's 28. She's 6 months pregnant. And what brings you in today? The nurse asked, looking at Joyce. She took a nasty spill, Kelly answered for her. Down the front steps. She hit her abdomen on the railing. She's experiencing some cramping and bleeding. The nurse frowned. She looked at Joyce. Ma'am, is that what happened? This was it. The moment. I held my breath. I stood just behind Kelly, praying Joyce would scream. Praying she would grab the nurse's arm and tell the truth. Kelly's hand moved from her shoulder to her hand. He interlaced their fingers. I saw his knuckles go white. He was squeezing her hand so hard it must have felt like he was crushing the bones. Joyce looked up at the nurse. Her lip trembled. She looked at Kelly, then at me. She saw the threat in his eyes. She saw the fear in mine. Yes, Joyce whispered, looking down at her lap. I tripped. I'm so clumsy. The nurse typed it in. Okay, honey, don't worry. We'll get you back right away to check on the baby. They wheeled her into the waiting area while they prepped a room. The waiting room was crowded. A kid with a broken arm, an old man coughing, a TV blaring the news in the corner. It was chaotic, but Kelly created a bubble of silence around us. He sat in the chair right next to Joyce's wheelchair. He pulled his chair, so close their knees were touching. He never let go of her hand. He stroked the back of it with his thumb, over and over. It looked affectionate, but I knew he was keeping her anchored. He was blocking her line of sight. He was making sure she couldn't make eye contact with the security guard or the other patients. I sat on the other side of Joyce. I felt useless. I felt small. "You're doing great, babe," Kelly whispered in her ear, loud enough for the woman across from us to hear. "I'm right here. I'm not going to leave your side." Joyce just stared straight ahead. She had gone somewhere else in her mind. She had shut down. I looked at my son, and I realized something terrifying. He wasn't freezing up. He wasn't scared. He was thriving. He liked this. He liked the control. He liked knowing that two women were terrified of him, and the rest of the world thought he was a hero. "Mr. Ortiz," a voice called out. We all looked up. A nurse was standing at the double doors leading to the back. But it wasn't the young nurse from triage. This woman was older. She had gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, practical shoes, and a face that looked like it had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. She wasn't looking at the clipboard. She was looking straight at Kelly. She was looking at his hand gripping Joyce's hand. She was looking at the way he was crowding her space. "We're ready for her," the nurse said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the waiting room noise. Kelly stood up immediately, gripping the handles of the wheelchair. "I'll take her back," he said confidently. "Actually," the nurse said, taking a step forward and blocking his path. "We need to get her vitals and get her changed. There's not a lot of room in triage." "I don't mind," Kelly smiled, turning on the charm. "I want to be with my wife." The nurse didn't smile back. She put a hand on the wheelchair, firmly taking possession of it. "It's hospital policy," she lied. I knew it was a lie. I had been to this ER a dozen times. Husbands always went back. "We'll come get you once she's settled." Kelly hesitated. For a split second, the mask slipped. He looked annoyed. "I really prefer to stay with her. She gets anxious. And I prefer to do my job," the nurse said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She looked at Joyce. "Come on, honey. Let's get you safe. Let's get you safe." She didn't say, "Let's get you healthy." She said safe. Kelly froze. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't make a scene in a crowded waiting room without ruining his perfect husband act. He had to let go. He released the wheelchair. "I'll be right here, babe," he called out, his voice tight. The nurse wheeled Joyce through the double doors. As the doors swung shut, I saw Joyce's shoulders finally drop. I saw her take her first real breath in hours. I looked at the nurse's name tag as she turned away. Karen. I didn't know it then, but I was looking at the angel who was about to burn my son's world to the ground. The double doors swung shut with a heavy, mechanical thud. Then I heard the sweetest sound in the world, the sharp click of an electronic lock engaging. Kelly stood there for a second, staring at the wood grain of those doors. His hand was still half raised, like he was reaching for a handle that wasn't there anymore. For the first time all day, he looked unsure. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd let the leash slip out of his hand. He turned to me. The charm was gone. His face was tight, his jaw working back and forth. "Why did she take her?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "I told them I wanted to be with her." "Why did you let them take her, Mom?" "I didn't let them do anything," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "It's hospital policy, Kelly. You heard her." He ran a hand through his perfect hair, messing it up for the first time. "I don't like it." Joyce is confused. She's in pain. She might say something irrational. She might imagine things. He was pacing now. 3 steps to the water fountain, 3 steps back. He was checking his watch every 30 seconds. The head of the household mask was cracking, revealing the scared little boy underneath, the bully who knows the teacher is about to call his parents. I sat in that plastic chair, clutching my purse, and for the first time in months, I prayed not for my son, but against him. Keep those doors locked, Lord. Keep him out. Inside that exam room, a very different scene was playing out. Joyce told me about it later, every single detail, and I have replayed it in my mind 1,000 times like a favorite movie scene. Nurse Karen didn't take Joyce to a regular curtained bay. She took her to a private room with solid walls and a heavy door. She wheeled Joyce in, parked the chair, and then, this is the part that makes me want to cry, she turned the deadbolt on the inside of the room. Joyce was shaking. She was terrified that she had done something wrong, that Kelly was going to burst in any second. She was still reciting the lie in her head. I fell down the stairs. I fell down the stairs. Nurse Karen didn't start taking blood pressure. She didn't ask for insurance. She walked over to the sink, washed her hands slowly, and then leaned back against the counter. She crossed her arms and looked at Joyce, not with pity, but with a fierce, quiet understanding. "Honey," Karen said. Her voice was like granite, solid and unmovable. "I've been an ER nurse in Charleston for 22 years. I've seen women fall downstairs. I've seen women trip on rugs. And I've seen women who were shoved into furniture." Joyce didn't say a word. She just stared at her lap, picking at her fingernails. "I saw how he was holding your hand," Karen continued softly. "I saw how he wouldn't let you speak. And I saw the bruising on your arm when your sleeve slipped up in the hallway." Joyce flinched. She tried to pull her sweater down, but Karen gently stopped her. "He is not in this room," Karen said. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. "The door is locked. There is a security guard named Mike standing right on the other side of it. Your husband cannot get in here. He cannot hear you. You are safe." Joyce let out a sound, a small, broken whimper. "I need you to tell me the truth," Karen said. "Not for me. For that baby. If you tell me you fell, I have to treat you for a fall and send you home with him. If you tell me the truth, I can keep you here. I can get the police. I can get you out." Joyce looked up. Tears were streaming down her face now, hot and fast. She looked at the locked door, then back at the stranger who was offering her a lifeline. He said, Joyce choked out. "He said he would take the baby. He said no one would believe me." Karen walked over and knelt beside the wheelchair. She took Joyce's hands, gently this time. "I believe you. The doctor will believe you. The police will believe you. But you have to say it. You have to break the silence, or I can't help you." Joyce took a deep, shuddering breath. She thought about the gym bag on the floor. She thought about the punch through the drywall. She thought about me, standing in the hallway with my arms spread wide. "I didn't fall," Joyce whispered. "Okay," Karen nodded. "What happened?" "He shoved me," Joyce said, her voice getting stronger. "He shoved me into the table, and he hit his mother's wall." Karen nodded firmly. She stood up, walked to the wall phone, the lifeline I had been too scared to use, and picked it up. "Code Silver in room 4, she said into the receiver. "Notify security and call Detective Miller. Domestic assault. Perpetrator is in the waiting room." She hung up and looked at Joyce. "It's done. You aren't going back to that house." Back in the waiting room, the atmosphere shifted. I felt it before I saw it. Kelly had stopped pacing. He was standing right in front of the double doors, staring through the small rectangular window. He was trying to see in. He was trying to regain control. "It's taking too long," he muttered to me. "I'm going back there." "Kelly, sit down," I said. "No," he snapped. "She needs me. She's probably crying for me." He reached for the handle. At that exact moment, the doors opened. But it wasn't Joyce coming out. It was Nurse Karen. She stepped out, filling the doorway. She was 5'4", maybe, but she looked 10 feet tall. She didn't have a clipboard. She didn't have a smile. She stood with her feet planted apart, blocking the view into the hallway. Kelly stepped back, surprised by her sudden appearance. He put the mask back on instantly. "Nurse," he said, flashing that charming white-toothed smile. "Is she done? Can I see her now? I'm really worried about my wife." Karen didn't smile back. She didn't blink. She looked him up and down with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Your wife is being admitted," Karen said. Her voice carried across the quiet waiting room. People looked up from their magazines. "Admitted?" Kelly's smile faltered. "For a fall? That seems extreme. I need to speak to the doctor. I don't authorize admission." "She isn't being admitted for a fall, Mr. Ortiz," Karen said. The air left the room. Kelly froze. It was the moment the title of this video promised you. He froze. His hands, which had been gesturing wildly, stopped in midair. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. His eyes went wide, darting from Karen's face to the security guard who had quietly moved up behind her. He knew. In that split second, he knew that Joyce hadn't stuck to the script. He knew that his threats hadn't worked. He knew that the unstable narrative had crumbled against the wall of this nurse's experience. "I don't know what she told you," Kelly stammered, his voice rising in pitch. "She's confused. She's hormonal. You can't believe a word she says." "I believe the bruises," Karen said, "and I believe the ultrasound. I want to see my wife." Kelly shouted, stepping forward aggressively. "This is illegal. You are kidnapping my wife." Karen didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She just raised one finger and pointed toward the automatic doors at the front of the ER. "You need to step away from my unit," she said. "Or what?" Kelly sneered, leaning into her face. "You're just a nurse." Karen smiled then. It was a cold, terrifying smile. "Or the 2 police officers walking up behind you right now will help you step away." Kelly spun around. Through the glass sliding doors, the blue lights were already flashing against the pavement. 2 uniformed officers were walking briskly through the entrance, their hands resting on their belts. They weren't smiling. They were looking right at him. Kelly looked back at Karen. He looked at me. For the first time in his life, my golden boy looked small. The arrogance evaporated. The control dissolved. He looked like a trapped animal, realizing the cage door had just slammed shut. He didn't run. He couldn't. He just stood there, frozen as the officers approached him. I sat in my chair, tears streaming down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of sheer, overwhelming relief. The monster had been unmasked, and all it took was one nurse who refused to look away. There is a saying in the South that blood is thicker than water. It means you stick by your family no matter how ugly things get. You hide the drinking, you hide the debts, and you certainly hide the violence. For 65 years, I lived by that code. But as I watched 2 police officers stop in front of my son in that hospital waiting room, I realized that code was a lie. Blood might be thicker than water, but it isn't more important than the truth. The officers were young, maybe in their 30s. One was tall with a buzz cut. The other had a notepad in his hand. They didn't look angry. They looked like they were just doing a job. Kelly stood up straight, buttoning his suit jacket with his good hand. He took a deep breath and put that charming, winning smile back on his face. It was the smile he used to get out of speeding tickets. It was the smile he used to close deals at the firm. He thought it would work here. "Officers," Kelly said, his voice smooth and confident. He even extended his hand. "I'm so glad you're here. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. My wife is having a medical episode due to her pregnancy, and this nurse seems to be confused about the situation." The tall officer didn't shake his hand. He didn't smile back. He just looked at Kelly's hand hovering in the air until Kelly awkwardly dropped it to his side. "Are you Kelly Ortiz?" the officer asked. "I am," Kelly said, a little tighter this time. "I'm sure you know my father-in-law, Judge Reynolds. We play golf at the club. If you need to call him to clear this up, I have his cell number." It was the good old boy network in action. It was the Charleston way. Drop a name, share a laugh, and make the problem go away. I had seen Kelly do it 100 times. But the officer didn't blink. "Mr. Ortiz, we aren't calling anyone. We have a statement from the attending nurse regarding a domestic assault, and we have photographs of injuries on your wife that are inconsistent with a fall." Kelly's face went red. "That is hearsay. My wife is mentally unstable. She doesn't know what she's saying." "Turn around, sir," the officer said. He reached for his belt. I heard the sound, that distinct metallic clink of handcuffs being unholstered. Kelly took a step back. "You can't be serious. Do you know who I am? You can't arrest me in a hospital. People are watching. Turn around." "Now," the officer repeated, his voice dropping an octave. Kelly looked at me. His eyes were wild. He was looking for his mommy to fix it. He was looking for me to jump up and scream, to threaten to sue the department, to use my own reputation to save him. I stayed in my chair. I gripped my purse with both hands, and I looked him right in the eye. I didn't say a word. Kelly saw it then. He saw that I wasn't going to save him. He slowly turned around. He put his hands behind his back. When the metal cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, I flinched. It's a sound a mother never expects to hear. It's the sound of your failure, but it was also the sound of Joyce's freedom. The officers marched him out. They didn't let him cover his face. They walked him right through the center of the waiting room, past the neighbors, past the strangers, past the nurse's station. Every head turned. People whispered, "Is that Kelly Ortiz? My God, is he arrested? What did he do?" I watched him go through the sliding glass doors and into the back of the squad car. I watched the blue lights fade into the distance. And then I was left alone in the silence of the waiting room. I should have felt ashamed. I should have wanted to crawl under a rock. But as I stood up to go find Nurse Karen and see my daughter-in-law, I felt lighter than I had in years. The real punishment, though, didn't happen in the jail cell. It happened in the grocery store. It happened at the post office. It happened on the church steps. News in Charleston travels faster than the internet. By the next morning, everyone knew. The phone in my house started ringing at 7 a.m. "Christina," it was Martha from next door. Her voice was dripping with that fake, sugary concern we specialize in down here. "I saw the police car last night, and I heard Kelly is in custody. I just wanted to call and say I'm praying for you. It must be a terrible misunderstanding." I told Bob, "Kelly wouldn't hurt a fly." I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone. I looked at the empty spot at the table where Kelly used to sit. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Martha," I said clearly. There was a long pause on the other end. "Excuse me?" "He hit her," I said. "He beat his pregnant wife. And he is exactly where he belongs." Martha gasped. She didn't know what to say. The script says I'm supposed to defend him. I'm supposed to say, "We're working through a difficult time," or "Please respect our privacy." I wasn't supposed to agree with the police. "Oh," Martha stammered. "Well, bless your heart, Christina. That's very brave of you to say." She hung up. I went to the Piggly Wiggly later that week to get groceries for Joyce, who was staying in my guest room now. I walked down the aisle, and I saw Mrs. Higgins, the head of the church flower committee. She saw me coming and immediately pretended to be very interested in a can of soup. She turned her back to me. "That's how they punish you. They don't yell. They just shun you. They make you invisible. Because if they acknowledge that a nice boy from a nice family could be a monster, They have to wonder about their own sons. They have to wonder about what goes on behind their own closed doors. I walked right up to her. "Hello, Sarah," I said. She jumped and turned around, forcing a tight smile. "Christina, I didn't see you there." "I know you heard about Kelly," I said. I didn't lower my voice. "I know everyone is talking." "Well, we were just shocked," Sarah whispered, leaning in close. "We know how much pressure he's been under at work. Men, they just snap sometimes. I'm sure once Joyce calms down and drops the charges, you can all put this behind you." "Joyce isn't dropping the charges," I said, "and I'm helping her testify." Sarah's eyes bugged out of her head. "You? But he's your son." "He is," I said, "and he broke the law. He hurt a woman. Being my son doesn't give him a pass. Sarah, if we don't hold our own boys accountable, who will?" I left her standing there in the canned vegetable aisle with her mouth open. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Every instinct in me wanted to protect my family name. I wanted to make excuses. I wanted to hide. But every time I went home and saw Joyce limping down the hallway, clutching her healing stomach, I remembered the hospital waiting room. I remembered the nurse standing her ground. I lost friends that week. I was uninvited from a bridge club. People crossed the street to avoid talking to me. They looked at me like I was a traitor to my own blood. But let me tell you something about the walk of shame. It's only shameful if you accept their judgment. I went to the jail on Friday. Kelly had been calling me collect for 3 days, and I hadn't answered. But I needed to see him one last time. I sat on the other side of the glass. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked tired. He hadn't shaved. "Mom," he said into the phone, his voice cracking, "you have to get me out. The bail is set at $50,000. You have that in your savings. Get me out, and I can fix this." I looked at my son. I looked for the little boy I used to rock to sleep. I looked for the teenager who brought me flowers on Mother's Day. But all I saw was a man who thought he was entitled to hurt people because he was stressed. "I'm not paying your bail, Kelly." I said. "What?" He slammed his hand against the glass. "I'm your son. You owe me." "I owe you a lesson I should have taught you 20 years ago," I said, tears finally sliding down my cheeks. "I owe you consequences. You are going to stay in there. You are going to face a judge. And you are going to leave Joyce alone. If you leave me in here," he hissed, "I will never speak to you again. You will die alone, Christina." "I won't be alone," I said, standing up. "I'll have my granddaughter, and she will be safe." I hung up the phone. I walked out of that jail into the bright Charleston sunshine. I walked past the gossip, past the stares, past the judgment. I walked toward my car, toward Joyce, and toward a future that was messy and broken, but finally honest. September in Charleston brings a specific kind of relief. The humidity finally breaks, the air turns crisp, and you can sit on the porch without melting. It had been 3 months since the arrest. 3 months since I walked out of that jail and left my son to face his own mess. My house on Trad Street looked the same from the outside. The white paint, the black shutters, the jasmine climbing the trellis. But inside, everything had changed. The silence was gone. My quiet, pristine home was now filled with the sounds of 2 women rebuilding a life. There were pregnancy books stacked on the coffee table. There were prenatal vitamins on the kitchen counter next to my teapot. My guest room, which used to be reserved for visiting cousins, had been transformed. It wasn't the designer nursery Kelly had started building, the one with the expensive imported wallpaper and the custom crib. We couldn't go back to that house. That house was a crime scene to us now. Instead, our nursery was a patchwork of love. I brought down the old wooden cradle from the attic, the one Kelly had slept in 40 years ago. I sanded it down myself, scrubbing away the old varnish and the memories of the boy I thought I knew. I painted it a soft, creamy white. Joyce sewed the curtains herself, humming while she worked. We didn't have much. Kelly had drained the joint accounts before the arrest, leaving Joyce with almost nothing, but we had peace. And we had paper. The first week of September, the final court order arrived. I remember the mailman handing it to me. It was a thick envelope from the family court. I sat at the kitchen table and put on my reading glasses. Permanent restraining order. It stated, in clear black and white legal terms, that Kelly Ortiz could not come within 500 feet of Joyce or the unborn child. It stated that he had forfeited his visitation rights pending the outcome of the criminal trial. I stared at that paper. A restraining order against your own child is a strange thing to pray for. It's a heavy thing to hold in your hands. It represents the total failure of a family, but it also represents the only thing that matters: safety. I traced the judge's signature with my finger, and for the first time in months, my shoulders truly relaxed. He couldn't touch us. The law said so. 2 days later, the water broke. It was 2 a.m. I was asleep, dreaming of better days, when I heard Joyce call out from down the hall. "Christina, it's time." I jumped out of bed faster than I have in 20 years. My arthritis didn't even twinge. I grabbed the go bag, the real one this time, packed with excitement, not fear, and I met her in the hallway. Joyce was leaning against the wall, breathing through a contraction. She looked up at me, and she smiled. It wasn't a scared smile. It was a warrior's smile. "Let's go meet her," she said. The drive to the hospital was the complete opposite of that terrifying ride in June. Chapter 6 was silent. This drive was loud. I had the radio playing soft jazz. Joyce was groaning through the pain, but between contractions we were talking. "Did you grab the blanket?" she asked. I grabbed 3. I laughed, speeding a little down Broad Street. "I hope she has your nose," Joyce said, gripping the door handle. "Lord help her if she does." I joked back. "I hope she has your kindness." We pulled up to the same emergency room entrance. I saw the same security guard who had stood outside the door when Kelly was arrested. He recognized us. He waved, a genuine smile on his face, and helped me get the wheelchair. This time, when we went through the double doors, there was no fear. No one was holding Joyce's hand too tight. No one was speaking for her. She checked herself in. She signed the papers. She was in charge. Labor is a long, messy, beautiful business. I stayed by her side for 14 hours. I wiped her forehead with cool washcloths. I held her hand gently when the pain got bad. There were moments in the hardest parts of labor where Joyce cried out for Kelly. It's instinct, I think. You want the father there. You want the family to be whole. Hearing her call his name broke my heart, but I knew the Kelly she was calling for didn't exist. She was calling for the man she thought she married, not the man who put her in the hospital. "You can do this," I whispered to her, brushing the hair off her sweaty face. "You are strong enough. You don't need him. Look at what you've survived. This is the easy part." And she did it. At 4:12 p.m., on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the cry filled the room. It was a loud, angry, wonderful squawk. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, lifted the baby up. "It's a girl," she announced. They placed her on Joyce's chest. I watched my daughter-in-law transform. The fear that had lived in her eyes for a year vanished instantly, replaced by a fierce, overwhelming love. She sobbed, kissing the baby's wet head, counting her fingers, checking her toes. "She's here," Joyce whispered. "She's safe. She's really here." After they cleaned the baby up and swaddled her in the pink blanket I had brought, Joyce looked at me. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she was radiant. "Do you want to hold her, Grandma?" "Grandma!" I had been waiting to hear that word. I walked over to the bed. My hands were trembling just a little. Joyce passed the bundle to me. She was heavy, heavier than I expected. She was warm and solid. I looked down into that tiny, red, wrinkled face. She had dark hair, just like Kelly did when he was born. She had the same shape of eyes. I won't lie to you, seeing his face in hers was a shock. It was a bittersweet pang in my chest. But then she yawned a tiny, shuddering breath and opened her eyes. They were dark blue, brand new, and completely innocent. She didn't know about the violence. She didn't know about the gym bag or the bruises or the jail cell. She only knew warmth. She only knew safety. I held her close to my chest, inhaling that newborn smell, milk and powder and heaven. And that's when the realization hit me. It hit me so hard I had to sit down in the rocking chair. If I had not hung up the phone that day in the kitchen, if I had let Kelly take her to Ohio, if I had stayed silent to protect my reputation, I would not be holding this child. She would be hundreds of miles away, hidden behind drawn blinds. I would be sitting in my empty house, looking at photos on Facebook, wondering if she was safe. Or worse, she might not have survived the stress, the violence, the accidents. I looked at her tiny hand curling around my pinky finger. I got you. I whispered to her, tears dripping off my chin and landing on the blanket. I'm sorry it took me so long to be brave, but I promise you, no one will ever hurt you. I will stand between you and the world if I have to. Joyce watched us from the bed. I want to name her Lily, she said softly, because lilies are tough. They come back every spring, no matter how bad the winter was. Lily, I tested the name. Lily Grace. Lily Grace, Joyce agreed. We stayed in the hospital for 2 days. When it was time to leave, I pulled my car around. I buckled the car seat into the back, properly, tightly. I drove like I was carrying the crown jewels. Bringing her into my house was the final step of the healing. We walked through the front door, and the house didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like a home. That first night, I sat in the rocking chair in the guest room, now Lily's room. Joyce was asleep in the bed next to the crib. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet. It was the silence of safety. I thought about Kelly sitting in his cell. I grieved for him. I really did. You never stop loving your child, even when they become a monster. But looking at Lily sleeping in that cradle I had refinished, I knew I had made the right trade. I traded my son for my granddaughter. I traded my pride for her life. And as I watched her little chest rise and fall, I knew I would make that trade again in a heartbeat. We had scars. We had a messy, complicated future ahead of us with trials and lawyers. But we had this. We had a new life. And this time, we weren't going to let anyone control it. The first time I walked back into St. Michael's Church, my knees were knocking together, so hard I thought they might bruise. It had been 4 months since the arrest. 4 months since the rumors started flying around Charleston like pollen in the spring. I wore my blue Sunday suit, the one I usually save for Easter. I put on my lipstick. I held my head high. Beside me, Joyce walked with a quiet strength she never had before, carrying little Lily in a carrier against her chest. We walked up the steps, past the greeters who didn't quite know where to look. We walked down the center aisle. I could feel the eyes on us. I could hear the sudden hush that fell over the pews. It was the sound of judgment. It was the sound of people waiting to see if the mother of the wife-beater would dare to show her face in the Lord's house. We didn't sit in the back. We walked right up to our old pew, 3rd row from the front. We sat down. The service started like any other. We sang the hymns. We recited the prayers. But the air was thick. You could feel the tension. Everyone knew that Kelly was sitting in a cell 10 miles away, waiting for trial. Everyone knew I was the one who put him there. Toward the end of the service, Pastor Miller opened the floor for testimonies. Usually, this is when Mrs. Gable talks about her hip surgery recovery, or Mr. Henderson thanks the congregation for the casseroles after his wife passed. It's polite. It's safe. The pastor looked out at the congregation. Does anyone have a word to share on their heart today? Silence stretched out. I looked at Joyce. She was looking down at Lily, rocking her gently. She looked up at me and gave a tiny nod. My heart hammered against my ribs. My hands were sweating, but I remembered Nurse Karen standing in that waiting room, blocking the door. I remembered the bruises on Joyce's arm. I remembered the vow I made to my granddaughter. I stood up. The sound of my heels clicking on the hardwood floor echoed as I walked to the front. I turned around to face the congregation, my friends, my neighbors, the people who had shunned me in the grocery store. I took a deep breath. I know what you've all been whispering. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. You're whispering about my son, Kelly. You're whispering about the violence. You're whispering about how a good family like ours could end up in the police blotter. I saw Mrs. Higgins in the second row stiffen. She looked ready to faint. I used to be just like you. I continued, looking right at her. I thought that if we dressed right and spoke right and came to church every Sunday, we were safe. I thought abuse was something that happened to other people. People who didn't live on Trad Street. People who didn't have good jobs. I paused. The church was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. But I was wrong. I watched my son, my golden boy, slowly destroy his wife. I saw the bruises, and I looked away because I didn't want to believe it. I prioritized my family's reputation over my daughter-in-law's safety. I almost let him take my granddaughter away because I was too scared to cause a scene. I looked down at Joyce, who was watching me with tears in her eyes. We are taught that love covers a multitude of sins, I said, my voice rising. But we have confused love with secrecy. Covering up abuse isn't love. It's complicity. Enabling a monster isn't loyalty. It's betrayal. I gripped the podium. I love my son. I always will. But I love justice more. I love my granddaughter more. And if standing here today and telling you the ugly truth makes me a bad mother in your eyes, then so be it. But I will not keep his secrets anymore. The cycle stops with me. It stops with that baby girl in the third pew. I stepped down. I expected silence. I expected them to look away. But then, from the back of the church, a woman stood up. It was Helen, a quiet woman in her 70s who sat alone every week. She had always worn long sleeves, even in July. Thank you, Christina, Helen said, her voice trembling. My husband, he was the same, for 40 years, and I never told a soul. Then another woman stood up, and another. It wasn't a wave of applause. It was a wave of confession. It was a breaking of the dam. By the time I got back to my seat, half the women in the room were wiping their eyes. The shame had lifted. By speaking the truth, I had given them permission to stop pretending their lives were perfect. That Sunday didn't fix everything. There were still people who wouldn't talk to me. There were still legal battles ahead. But as we walked out of the church into the bright September sun, I didn't feel the weight of the secrets anymore. I'm 65 years old. I thought my life was winding down. I thought my job was just to bake cookies and spoil my grandkids. But I realize now that my real work is just beginning. My work is to be loud. My work is to make sure that no other woman in my town feels like she has to hide her bruises under a cardigan because she's afraid of what the neighbors will think. This brings me back to you. I told you this story not just to shock you, but to ask you the question that haunts me. Remember that moment in the kitchen in Chapter 4 when I hung up the phone? I still don't know if I did the right thing. I saved my access to the baby, yes, but I risked Joyce's life for a week. It was a gamble. I want you to tell me in the comments below. Be honest with me. If you were in my shoes, holding that phone, would you have called 911 right then and there? Or would you have waited like I did? I read every single comment, and I really want to know what you think. And please, if this story touched a nerve, if you were sitting there watching this and thinking about your own daughter or your neighbor or even your own marriage, don't let the silence win. Abuse thrives in the dark. It thrives when good women say nothing. Be the person who asks the hard question. Be the nurse Karen who locks the door. Be the grandmother who breaks the cycle. If you found value in my testimony, please click the like button. It helps this story reach other women who might need to hear it. And if you want to see how we raise Lily and how the trial turns out, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. There is life after the storm. It's different. It's messy, but it is ours. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are never too old to do the right thing. Click the video on your screen right now.